T-Mobile and Sprint moving forward with their deal after winning approval from the Federal Communications Commission. Ahead of the deal, a group of bidders are lining up to buy Boost Mobile for up to $3 billion. One bidder, Boost Mobile founder Peter Adderton, with us now here at Post 9 to discuss the sale of Boost Mobile U.S. and whether he will actually be joining that bidding war. We know you will be. How much would you pay?
Well, it's interesting because we really need to see what the business looks like now, what kind of health it's in. Boost has been going for a little while now. I think we started about 18 years ago, so it's going to be interesting. But I think the most important thing is the wholesale deal. You know, looking back at the business, you can look at the value of it, but what's the new 6-year wholesale deal that T-Mobile is proposing? I think that's the critical part of this whole equation. What does that look like? What are the rates going to look like? Will it be able to truly be able to compete against Metro PCS? I think my biggest concern is that those details need to be kind of worked out now. We shouldn't be waiting for the close of the transaction. We should be doing those now and kind of calling on the DOJ, the Department of Justice, to make that a condition, if they can approve the merger, that they negotiate that deal now, because I think that's the stick that you need to make sure that T-Mobile gives you the best possible deal. Because without that, it doesn't really matter what you pay for it. It's only what the value is going to be going forward.
Yeah, and we are waiting for the DOJ antitrust division to sign off and give the green light on this. How important is the spectrum to this, especially when you are talking about antitrust and competition?
So I've been calling for divestiture of spectrum. I think that whoever buys that spectrum, T-Mobile doesn't need everything that they've got. We've been calling for kind of 60 megahertz as the 2.5 to come out to really build a low-income broadband network. So if you think about it in the city areas, we'll be able to create a very large Wi-Fi experience and be able to offer great pricing. So I'm hoping that there are structural remedies that are coming out from the DOJ. We're obviously seeing what the FCC did, and Chairman Pai made the right decision to actually have them divest Boost. Obviously, we've got to see what those conditions are and the urban build-out, but I'm really hoping that the DOJ steps up and says, OK, divestiture of spectrum, part of it would be really important to the consumers.
Is that spectrum make or break for you?
No, it doesn't make or break it for us. I just think that it would be really good to create that fourth network. What an MVNO does is it creates like the fourth virtual network, and I think we need that. I don't know whether we necessarily need 4 networks, whether we need Sprint in play, but we definitely need to make sure that the fourth player, which is going to be this divested business, has the capacity to be able to compete. So I think that building it out in low-income areas and being able to offer broadband to consumers who necessarily couldn't get it, this belief that 5G is going to be cheaper, I don't buy that. The reason why I don't buy that is to build a network like 5G, to buy the spectrum, and then to say, I'm going to charge the same as 4G, I just don't think that's the case. It might be in the interim.
Isn't that what T-Mobile's saying?
Yeah, but I think that's the interim. I think there's going to be a speed-based pricing. So the faster you get, the more you pay. Again, T-Mobile is saying they're going to fix pricing. I think they've said they're going to fix it for 3 years. I don't know about you guys. I plan to live longer than 3 years. So I want to know what the 4th year looks like and what the 5th year looks like. And that's why I was excited, by the way, that the FCC put that 6-year hold on that wholesale deal, because that's a significant amount of time.
So you think the early days of this generation will be highly promotional but won't last?
No, and I also think on 5G, if you think about 5G, the one thing that they claim is the autonomous car, right? That's the first thing you ever hear. The average median income for an American household is $60,000. The cost for an autonomous car, they're saying, is going to be $70,000 to $150,000. I'm pretty sure that the average American's not going down to the car lot right now putting their name down for an autonomous car. So when you look at 5G and you think about the value that brings, it brings value to a certain group, but not to the low income, not to the mass consumers here in America. I talked about this before. 5G works for devices outside of the smartphone. What more do you want from your phone right now than better coverage and cheaper pricing? And I think that that's what it works. This concept that you'll be able to download movies, I hear, 30 movies in 3 seconds. Well, the biggest problem you have with the low-income market is that they don't have cloud storage, right? So they're going to have to store those on their phones because they don't have the capacity to go out there and buy cloud storage. So I'm sitting back going, they have a bigger problem with their memory now. I mean, people don't realize this. The low-income consumers are using up their memory on their handsets to literally have their photos and everything else.
You make it sound like 5G will widen the digital divide rather than smooth it out.
In my opinion, 4G is plenty enough for the consumers that are out there in the marketplace. And I do believe that 5G will have a role, but not in the next 3 to 4 years, and not for the average consumer.
When we talk about 5G, obviously front and center in terms of the conversations right now is Huawei and the ban that's in place here in the U.S. I think a lot of people probably don't realize that Australia was really one of the first countries to actually put a ban in place on Huawei. You operate in Australia. You've been a businessman in Australia. How has that played out there, and are there lessons to be learned here?
Well, there is. In fact, one of the mergers that we had down there going from 4 to 3 was TPG to Vodafone, and TPG pulled out of building their network, their fourth network, because they're claiming that Huawei was their supplier and they couldn't get anybody cheap enough to be able to build it. So I think it had an impact down there. It actually eliminated the fourth wireless provider down there that was coming into the marketplace. So, you know, I look at that, and there's obviously political ramifications there. Huawei do have some incredibly good handsets, some incredibly good technology in handset development and building. So I hope they sort that out quickly for the interest for the consumer, because I think the consumer is losing a lot. They provide a very low-income smartphone. So I think that, you know, as they work through that and they fix that problem, I'm hoping that that will bear fruit for everyone.
And what does working it out mean? Because increasingly what we're hearing from the Trump administration is that China is just so naturally a threat that we can't trust any company we view as being close to them. It doesn't matter what the facts are. We're not talking about a test for security, just no. Do there have to be facts? Does there have to be a test for security that Huawei has the opportunity to pass?
Well, this is way above my pay grade, but just from my perspective, I think when you look at China and you look at America and you look at the relationships that go between the two in telecom, there are strained relationships. There's a lot of information flowing through these devices, so I can absolutely understand why governments, Australia, US, are concerned about that information. So until you can actually 100% secure that that's the case, that they are being secured, I think they've made the right approach. They've taken the right approach.
Quickly, just want to get your thoughts on what seems to be increasing competition when you have cable TV companies like Altice, Charter Communications, our parent company Comcast getting into wireless as well.
Yeah, I think they're getting into wireless for strategic reasons. I think they just want to keep their cable providers. I think if they were truly serious about it, they'd probably take a different approach. I think that when you look at the amount of money that they're spending, I think it's more as a protection strategy to give the street something to say, hey, we're in wireless. But whether that is a long-term strategy for them, I'm highly doubtful.